What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. I rank Moira very high on my tier list for Season 3. She got a bit of a buff with her Coalescence charge rate, but with a lot of other properties moving around based on the things that are getting played in the meta, Moira has great matchups or pair-ups that are going to solve a lot of problems for you. First up, let's talk about her ability to synchronize with Wrecking Ball, a character that's getting played a lot. Oftentimes, players feel more comfortable playing safely behind a Reinhardt, focusing on him in the front line, anchoring around the objective. But what your Wrecking Ball wants to do is go at the enemy's backline quickly. And while any support he receives is going to help him, oftentimes, if the enemy has a tank looking at you or running you down, if you are a slow support, you just can't see the engagements that Ball's trying to go for. But because Moira is so slippery and her fade cooldown is short and incredibly powerful, she either can get in or out of positions that Ball wants to play, so she can keep up with him. That alone is quite good, but also, until you get to the really high ends of the ladder, Wrecking Ball players' mechanics aren't necessarily good enough to land all their abilities perfectly, and his damage is not as easy as some of the other tanks. His abilities are severe, but it's a little difficult sometimes for him to solo kill targets, unless he lands everything perfectly. So because of that, one of the strongest combos you're gonna find is laying in a damage orb right on his engage, so that you get the 100 damage out of the slam, damage orb to soften them up further, and then her grasp, which has a ridiculous range, honestly, and very accurate to pressure down targets. This Wrecking Ball advice can go for any dive tank really, or even just a Reinhardt that wants to pin in deep to the enemy's backline instead of fortify. Anytime you have a team that's overly aggressive, you can make use of that space if you yourself have a very aggressive playstyle. Mercy is a very popular hero right now. Wrecking Ball is one of the better solutions to go flush her out, but often you will need another flanker threat to combine on the pincer. While Mercy is incredibly powerful, she's weak to being attacked on two sides. Moira is one of the most capable duelists in the game, which means her being alive with cooldowns against many things that normally you might assume would be a threat to a support, she's a threat to them, unless they hit a fairly difficult skill shot on her as she's doing her AD strafe. This playstyle was used in the Overwatch League for quite some time, and because it's kind of easy and not respected so much, there isn't really a formal name for playing Moira this way, but in many metas, she has been what I think is the deciding factor of the playstyle. The name I came up for it was called Swarm Comp. Reason I like that term is because the way you should play reminds me of Zergling surrounds in StarCraft, which essentially means is your very fast characters go out wide and then pincer in quick to death ball. That's what you're looking to do. To be able to find the backside of the fight where you can, so that you, with your accurate cleave damage, can focus down the targets that your team is fighting, and often take straight up duels 1v1 against a lot of characters. This is a playstyle that's rewarded by understanding the matchups, how difficult you are to hit, which characters are the ones you need to focus first. On this clip on Blizzard World, whereas a lot of supports prefer to hide back safely in the backline, I turn the corner, see the Widow doesn't have her scope yet, so I'm safe in this moment, able to throw an orb to zone out that high ground position she's trying to hold and hopefully sync it with when my Ball wants to engage. Now, normally you don't want to fade aggressively, but I don't think she's looking at me. Using my Ball as bait, I abuse the movement to close the distance to sync up with my Ball better, knowing that I'll have it back again in 6 seconds. Get in position to heal him and help damage the targets he's looking at. But this is the trick, looking for the backside of the fight. Lingering around in the back helps me sync up with the Ball again, and we're able to combo kill onto the Widowmaker. This is playing positions similar to what a Tracer might like to play, using mobility to get in and out of the enemy's backline safely, but a bit more forgiving and with a lot of extra stats and a ridiculous transformation ultimate that they recently buffed the charge rate on. Coalescence comes back faster now, and it already was considered a tempo ult, which is to say it's not one that you want to save for big value because its stats often don't beat many other ults. So because of that, you want to pick up the tempo on it. Use it to clean up fights quickly and try to get a lot of more ults, similar to Tracer, honestly, who also often tosses out her ults like candy to keep the pressure on. Now, I know the DPS Moira playstyle gets memed on quite a bit, as teammates that are purposely purposefully not healing the team just to rack up their own damage stats, and it's like seen as a throwing playstyle. Want to make it clear that's not what I'm advocating. You should heal your team, but you should understand the goals at play here. There's a lot of characters in the game that are hard for your teammates to deal with. Becoming a threat in yourself is one of the strongest ways to assert dominance in the support position. And you need to do it on most of the supports, honestly, if you want to climb, but Moira is especially good at this because of her unique interactions with quite a few characters. Probably the top one to consider is Genji, who's an incredibly popular pick, and it can feel difficult as a support to know what to do up against a very skilled Genji. Genji is probably the best example, but this goes for warding yourself off against any flanking squishy threat, but just Genji especially because normally there's very few things that can damage through his reflect. While Genji can reflect damage orb, it's very possible, similar to Junkrat, to place the area of effect in an annoying place significantly outside of his reflect hitbox while still hitting him. The grasp finishes him pretty easily as he's trying to reflect and get away, and because Fade is so severe, it's possible to even full out dodge his Nano Blade engage. You kind of even want to bait him to go directly at you, fade away, and the big distance you clear is like almost more than a dash, and that becomes easier the more you're pressuring him first. Securing eliminations is the name of the game in Overwatch. Your other stats don't matter, not at the end of the day, because damage you deal that doesn't result in a limb just feeds support ult, and healing you do that doesn't help your teammate get in a limb feeds you support ult, but did you use that to get in a limb? No, at some point you gotta eliminate the enemy, right? The stats at the end of this Midtown game show exactly what I'm talking about, and it's very common that I see this going up against many supports. Now, on one hand, you may look at the Genji on my team and say he definitely carried with the most limbs, but at the same time, I just taught you how to go at enemy Genjis as Moira, and if you look at my eliminations, damage, and healing, considering how low my healing is compared to theirs, and if you look at the scoreboard, it really wasn't close. We capped all 3 points. They barely got it beyond the first cap. The enemy support line has nearly double our total healing, but my damage alone is nearly double theirs. And of course, we're all converting more a limb, so it's a little unfair to compare that to that, but one leads to the other. And on the reverse side, enabling a Genji or any of your DPS, often selecting the targets on the enemy team that either counter them, like for example, if you're playing with a flyer hero, taking out their Widow, or in this case, playing with a Genji, of course, he's going to snowball lots of more limbs because that's what the character does. He gets dash resets on elimination, which is a win more type mechanic. I'm going to show a comparison of how I handled team fights on this map compared to the enemy Moira. Here's me finding the back side of the fight, looking for the pincer. I want to fight the enemy's backline. I'm trying to play around my balls engages, get my damage orb with him. He's afraid he's at low health, but I use Cole to solo Cole the Hanzo. Now this means I get to secure their backline, play in and out, while my teammates are on the front line, and we get to maintain this pincer now for the rest of this fight. Because think about it, they're fighting uphill into my main healer. Ana's gonna be able to heal the ball, but he also could have turned to fight with me and get healed in the Cole. Either way, there's a fortress up top and a flanking support in the back that they are really gonna struggle to pin down. Textbook stuff over and over. This is how we full hold them. They try to go underneath. We get an engage from up top. I'm checking for where the low targets are. Typically, it's not going to be a tank. One of the bigger weaknesses for Moira is that she is going to do very little damage to tanks, but if you're focus firing and they're already low, then that can be a viable target. In general, though, you're looking for the squishy characters, and it's also important to note that you can do this playstyle up against shield tanks. In this case, they have Zarya, but even if they had a Reinhardt or Sigma, these shields that normally block the line of sight of, say, an Ana, while your Wrecking Ball goes in and is trying to make plays on their backline, what I see is that often support players don't know how to help them, and your ball engages, rotates his cooldowns, you get nothing out of it, and then you slowly just lose as the enemy's front line pushes you. From watching this from the enemy support's point of view, I was kind of surprised how many absolutely useless orbs were thrown, like ones that are just purely speculative, gee, I hope I'm going to build some ult. That's not what this ability is for. You want to isolate a target in a lane, throw it at somebody, a squishy ideally, that you want to duel and pressure out of position or just straight up eliminate. This whole build ult thing, Moira, is an Overwatch 1 thing when the enemy had a big death ball that played together. And similarly, if you're focusing on heal orb too much, those are more for the days in Overwatch 1 where you had 2 tanks and everyone was always playing together. I'm going to say you're going to find situations where you can get big heal orb value, maybe like 30% of the time. Most of the time, it's going to be more efficient for you to pressure with damage orb first, try to get in a limb, and heal after that with just your primary spray heal. Keep in mind, they added a buff to damage orb that gives you resource anyway. That's why I prioritize heal orb so much lower now, because I think you're better off ramping up the gas pedal and base trading, because Moira is so durable later into the fight and hard to deal with. So even if you lose a teammate, it's not like you're a helpless support later in the fight and you wish you had your tank up. Sometimes I don't even need to necessarily worry if my wrecking ball falls, because he comes back fast anyway. And if there's squishies left over in the fight, I'm going to whittle them down and they're going to struggle to deal with me. Here's an example of the enemy Moira not having that gas pedal in mind. Heal orb through the team wasn't actually necessary, but here the enemy Hanzo gets a pick on me. And I am so disappointed with the enemy team's reaction to the ball in the back line. The Rhine pins to Narnia to try to, pin the ball? And yes, fighting the flanker, that's a good idea, but they lose all of their positioning as they get a pick. Meanwhile, the seconds tick by, the enemy Moira, me, has respawned already. In this time, this Moira could have been fighting the Genji. And with a healer down, they could have turned that healer pick into lots of other picks. But instead, this team focused the most durable target on the enemy team, my wrecking ball. And this is precisely what I think players struggle with ball with the most nowadays, is that they just want to sort of hide, and ball takes a fight to you and says, can you quickly make better decisions and go fight my team? Because that's what ball's weak to. Fighting his team. It's pretty tough to take him down, and Moira especially doesn't want to do that, but most supports don't. You can take this advice to apply to a lot of tanks or a lot of matchups. You're playing one of these characters and a Doomfist or Winston is just living in your backline. You have 2 options. Pick a character that can kill him, which a lot of those utility characters like Zenyatta and Ana die to those characters too rather easily. So playing to sustain like they're trying to do here, like they're just trying to not die to the ball, right? So they're using all their resources just to not die to him. But that doesn't eliminate the enemy. What did we say the rule was, right? You have to get eliminations. So as the ball is tooling around in the backline, what we need to be doing is finding picks on enemy squishies. Trying to sustain the death ball and keep everybody alive together is the exact wrong way to play this, and is how you end up with an end stat card of like 20,000+ healing, but hardly ever winning a team fight. Instead of aggressively going at the Genji or even the Ana, we're trying to heal the ball's damage, which isn't that high to begin with. Now, I did want to include a few examples of when I would advise to swap off Moira. She's good against Mercy, piercing shields, squishy backliners like snipers, Zen and Ana, can fend off flankers. That's a lot of good matchups. But the poor matchups, I'd say, is AoE healing or very tanky DPS. Torbjorn a little bit, but especially Bastion, as your opponent starts to realize that they can't really flank you because you're dueling them, and then they can't really kill your team either because you can heal them a lot. An often counter pick for this is Bastion, who just like puts down such a volume of damage, it can make an impact. And as well, because he has natural armor health, he won't fall victim to the damage orb shenanigans. Same thing with Reaper, who can fade away and either is doing no damage or lots of damage once he closes the distance on your tank. And with his lifesteal, you're not going to just duel him down. Another one for similar reasons is Junker Queen, who has super high damage, lots of self-healing. So whereas other tanks might fall to you once you take out their healers, Junker Queen can heal herself and just straight up duel you anyway. And her ultimate antis your team, which is really rough for Moira to deal with. Okay, in all these cases, I'd say then you actually need to pull out the utility bag of something that has an interaction against these stronger picks that are higher statted or brawly. And most commonly, I'd say you want to pick Ana in these scenarios to try to sneak in an anti-nade, which will stop these enemies from being so tanky. In some cases, Zenyatta might do the trick because Discord Orb also helps break points. So if a character is too tanky, he can help add the extra damage. I'd also say to look out for playing up against a very good Brig or Baptiste player, because while there are some scenarios that you will corner them and overwhelm them with like your damage orb and coalescence, a lot of the times they'll be able to save their squishier teammates with big AoE healing. So that damage orb comes in up against a Mercy who only can heal one target at a time, or even Kiriko, where there's like not a lot of healing to spread around. The cleave damage can be too much for them to handle, but the very forgiving AoE heals of Baptiste and Brig often will just rebuff your corny damage orb shenanigans. In short, I'd say the main ways you want to pull out this playstyle is if there is a flanker threat that is causing you too much problems, that it's difficult for you to help your team and you just got to defend yourself, or if you've got an overly aggressive tank, either a wrecking ball or a tank that's playing just like one. You can send in replay codes in the link in the description to get your gameplay featured as examples on the channel. Today's video was in part inspired by troubles that I see you guys having. This should make some things easier for you. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, please be sure to leave it with a like. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.